Let's unpack what the internal family system is.
Sure. So internal family systems is a type of psychotherapy. It was invented or discovered rather in the 80s by a man called Richard Schwartz, who's a psychotherapist in the States. And it's based on the premise that we are all made up of parts or like sub-personalities.
Okay, well.
And like a really relatable example we've all experienced is some people's like, that's really weird. It's kind of like, do you have multiple personalities? But say, you wake up in the morning and you have one part of you that wants to stay in bed for another hour, but another part of you wants to get up and be productive. So that's like an example of parts. But generally speaking, people will have the most struggles when they have two parts that are in conflict with each other inside. So like you could have a part of you that's, say, a real people pleaser, but then because of that part, you'll have like a polarization or a conflict where there's another part of you that just wants everybody to go away and doesn't want to talk to anyone because that's so exhausting being a people pleaser.
Interesting. So would that be the same like if I'm experiencing like high anxiety? Is that what somebody could be experiencing?
Yeah, totally. So when I work with clients, basically we work with the part of them that they are struggling with. So they might come to me and say, I have anxiety.
Okay.
And I'll just work with that part. And what we do is it's almost like a meditation, but it's very experiential. So I'll take my clients through, first of all, a grounding practice just to get them into their body and get them into a calm state. And that's putting them into what we call in IFS self energy, which is just that naturally calm, passionate, confident version of you. Your parts will work with you and speak to you and communicate with you when you're in self energy. It's like they feel very safe when you're in that state. And we'll ask the part all these questions, like ask the anxious part. First of all, I'll ask the client, where do you feel it in your body? How does it feel? And then we ask if it will separate. And then we get to know it with all of these questions. And eventually it will take us through to show us why it started doing its role. And it would be something that happened in your past that caused you to feel rejected, upset. And generally speaking, they're often childhood memories. And most of the time it'll be in a situation where something happened and there was perhaps, say, not a safe adult there to give you the comfort or the validation or the reassurance that you needed. And that causes relational trauma.
Okay.
And we're able to go into that memory and then do some inner child healing through like a visualization and get them to release the burden that they've been carrying. So for example, you might have an anxious part and it happens when you want to speak on social media or in front of someone, and it turns out that when you're in grade 1 you had to stand up in front of your class and say read, and you stumbled over your words and the whole class laughed at you. But this part, say your 6-year-old self, is still in that time and place, and they're still feeling that anxiety about everything. So we take your 6-year-old self out of there and we'll ask them, what was it that what did that make you believe about yourself, that experience? And they'll say, it made me believe that I'm stupid or something like that. Yep. And your 6-year-old self has been carrying that belief since you were 6, and it's playing out in a lot of areas of your life. So then we get your 6-year-old self to release that. And then it's so amazing. It's like you get to release that. And I watch my clients during that period, like they release it in their mind and I watch their whole face change. It softens, their shoulders drop, and it's like such a relief. They don't have to carry that belief around anymore. It's like very healing. But because we work with the part first, so say the anxious part, we never go any further than what that part allows us to. So your system will feel very safe. And it's not like, say, talk therapy where you might go to see a therapist and talk about something that happened to you and they're like, tell me more, tell me more. That can be re-traumatizing. But the way that this is structured, it's very safe and very gentle, although very powerful in the way that it works.
Is it kind of like in a hypnotic state that you're under?
Yeah, kind of. Like often clients will come out of it and they know what happened, but they're kind of like, what just happened? That was really weird, because they get really into it and you feel like you're literally back in that memory.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So almost like tapping into the subconscious to try and rewire the pattern that's come from that scenario.
Absolutely. And often the burden or the memory that comes up, most of the time my clients, I'm like, was that what you thought would come up in their head? I had no idea that was even in there. Or I've completely forgotten about it. It's deep in the subconscious.
So is this type of work mostly beneficial for those who might have experienced trauma?
Yes. I think everybody has experienced trauma. Like it can just be a tiny little moment, like the tiny moments you might look back on and think, oh, that's not a big deal. But it was to your 6-year-old self.
Of course, yeah.
But yeah, anyone would benefit from it. It's really, I think so. I'm such a fan.
How did you get into that line of work? Because it seems very niche. And I'm going to take a stab and say that not everybody's probably even heard of the internal family systems, or let alone toured with the idea of having multiple parts?
Yes. So it was kind of by accident. I've always very much been into personal development and healing work, and I grew up in a household with alcohol and a lot of intergenerational trauma, and struggled for a lot of my life with my mental health, on and off, like periods of depression and things. And then I was doing a course just for myself in internal family systems that I kind of came across, and I started doing this work and I started practicing with some of the women that I'd done the course with, and it was amazing, like in healing a lot of my own trauma. And that was back in 2021. But prior to that, in 2019, I had been diagnosed with bipolar type 2, and through, I guess, trial and error, like I'd tried a few medications. It was never really that fun, never really found anything that worked. And if it did, it had a lot of terrible side effects. But in 2021, I was going to consider conceiving. So I went off my medication and happened to come across a book that week that I was coming off my medication called Med Free Bipolar. And I thought, hey, can't hurt to read this. So I did. And this woman who claims to be a completely recovered psych patient for 10 years, and she'd had bipolar 1, schizophrenic tendencies, like really terrible struggles, which thankfully I hadn't had. But, you know, the premise was the same. It was like healing with nutrition and like making sure that you have the right supplementation if your body's not absorbing the nutrition. She likens the brain to be like a baby. So when the baby is inside its mother, it will take all the nutrients to get what it needs. If the mother's not getting that nutrition, it would strip that nutrition from her bones, her blood, whatever it needs. When it's earthside, it'll cry. It'll let you know when it's hungry. It kind of acts that out. She says the brain is the same. So if the brain's not getting the right nutrition, it's going to act up. And so I did all of these things with the help of my naturopath, and I found I felt better on the supplements than I did with medication. So I just went completely off medication. I haven't had a single episode since January 2020. And if I haven't been on medication since January 2021. And if I walked into a psychiatrist's office today, I wouldn't even meet the criteria for bipolar anymore. But I honestly, hand on heart, think that I did that because I healed a lot of my trauma, and I did heal a lot of my trauma through IFS. Like, it was just so amazing. Every session I just felt a little bit lighter. It was just life-changing, even just with a few sessions. And after like healing all the symptoms of bipolar, I was like, I didn't really think about it, but then I was doing coaching at the time in this group, and I told my story in there about how I'd cured all my symptoms of bipolar, and I was really proud of myself. And
which is huge.
Yeah,
like,
but
huge.
I still had a lot of like shame and stigma around it, like, you know, the things that go on in like even the medical system, but things that people say about it, and even the way it's depicted in media, it's really negative.
As in having
Yeah, like for example, there's a TV show called Ozark. Not that I watched it, but I'd heard that there was a character on there who was bipolar, and he'd gone off his medication, then murdered someone. Like just that kind of thing. It's like, that's not an accurate depiction, but that's what is out there. But I told this story in just this group who I felt very safe with, and a lot of them contacted me directly, and they just were like so moved, and they were like, that is amazing. And after that, I'd done a plant medicine journey, and in the journey it's told me, you need to tell your story. Like, people need to know that there's another way, and that, you know, this is really powerful. And I'd been doing IFS just on myself and with girls that I'd studied with. But it was, the journey said, you need to tell your story, and you need to go and do something in that field, and you need to go and study IFS, and then you also need to get like a certification to become a plant medicine facilitator. So I did that.
That's incredible.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Thank you.
When you found that you were moving from like going through and healing all those parts, what was the main moment that you felt like it was like that was the key opening to realizing that was the path for you?
I toyed with the idea, because I'm like, oh, this is really cool and I love it, but I'm also a reflector and we can change our mind a lot. So I just sat with it for a couple of years.
Anyone listening, a reflector is in the human design chart.
Yeah. So I was like, I don't know, or I don't know if I want to get into therapy. Like, I actually studied psychology in my 20s, and then I stopped studying it because statistics just bored me to tears, but I loved psychology. Yeah. But there's the thought of being a therapist, being a reflector as well, you take on some people's energies, and I just thought maybe that might be too much for me, maybe that might be too exhausting.
Yeah.
But this is very different because you get your clients to go through the process. It's not like they're coming in and, I guess, just telling you all their problems, and then you're having to sit there and take all that on. you're actually guiding someone through a beautiful process where they're in self-energy. So rather than you being, I guess, like the therapist that kind of helps them, you just guide them through a process which then gives them a tool to take themselves through it. And it's incredibly empowering for them. And it's just such an honor to witness, and it gives me so much energy. Like I hope I can swear on here.
Say whatever you want.
But like I got off a call with a client yesterday and I just like hung up, and then I was like, I fucking love my job. Like it's so
that's amazing.
good. Yeah.
And hugely rewarding, because some people never find the thing that they sum up.
Yeah. And also it's cool, like even just from a really basic perspective, and I guess this is something your listeners can take home, is that just even using what we call parts language when we're working with parts. So say you do feel anxious, just rather than going, I'm anxious or I'm an anxious person, say, there's a part of me that feels anxious, and then get curious about that. But even just saying there's a part of me, then it's not all of you. And it just feels a little bit lighter. And that's just a really good way to start to use this modality just in your own life, like saying there's a part of me, and also in your relationship. So say you have a part of you that feels sad or feels angry. Say you say to your partner, for example, like, hey, there's a part of me that feels angry about what happened yesterday. Can we talk about that later? Versus if you go up to them, you're like, I'm really fucking angry at you because of what you said yesterday. Like they're going to respond so much more differently. And it's just, you're going to get a better outcome if you can speak for your parts.
Even you saying that to me, right, when you're like, oh, there's a part of me, I was like, oh, it just seems like a little problem.
Yeah.
As opposed to I'm angry is like, oh, no, we have a big problem.
Yeah.
Like just the reframe and how you say it.
Yeah. And also that is, in essence, the difference between you taking self-responsibility versus projecting and blaming
to somebody else for like your emotions or feelings in that moment to a situation.
Yeah.
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 So how, if I'm sitting at home and I'm like, oh, I'd be really interested in this, or to start navigating my inner world, let's say, what's some ways that I could try and connect with it?
So in IFS, what we call self-energy, the way to know if you're in self-energy is by, they're called the 8 C's. So like they are curiosity. I always say curiosity, go there first. That's like my favorite of the 8 C's. And I think the world would be a better place if everybody just had a little bit more curiosity.
I agree. Yeah.
Like rather than, judging or, all those things, if you just got curious about yourself, but about like other people, if you're triggered by something, like get curious, like I wonder where that's coming from. Like there's a part of me that feels angry about that. Why is that? And just getting curious about that. Like you can journal on it as well. There's loads of meditations online if you want to do them. Like I've got one on Insight Timer and I've got some free ones on my website, but there are loads of IFS meditations you can do if you want to explore it that way. Using parts language, like even just you could journal on, hey, there's a part of me that feels anxious, like, and just, get curious. But the other C's are, if I can remember them all off the top of my head, so it's like compassion, creativity, connectedness. So that's connectedness to yourself or another person. Should I say creativity? Clarity. No, I can't remember them.
That's right.
I can never remember.
That's a great start, though.
Yeah, but just like you can just Google the 8 C's of IFS, but that's how you know you're in self-energy. So if you want to get into self-energy, like to recognize those traits, and like then if you've got enough self there, and then just that separation part, like, oh, there's a part of me, getting curious about that will create that little bit of separation between you and the part. Yeah, and then being able to speak for your parts, like in any situation, not just your partner, but like, your boss. You could say, hey, I feel a bit anxious about what's upcoming. Can we talk about it? Like those things are so helpful, especially for a lot of us. And I think women really struggle with like speaking up for themselves sometimes, or just saying how they feel, because, we're kind of caretakers, or we're conditioned to be caretakers, but just being able to speak for the part, it can feel a lot less daunting, I think.
No, I agree with you. Actually, I personally struggled with the speaking up. I think the people pleaser part love to take over a lot. The good girl.
Yeah.
So let me just do for you whatever you need. My needs will put on the back burner and it'll be okay. Type of thing, yeah.
And that's a big thing. And also just to recognize in IFS, we look at parts like they all have such good intentions for us. Even if you have parts that you don't like their behavior, there'll be a reason why they started doing their role. And it can be an extreme reason, like, for example, like addictions. In IFS, we look at that as a part, but that part of you is just engaging in that addiction because that person cannot bear to feel the emotions underneath. They're generally very highly traumatized people, but that part of them is just trying their best to make them feel better.
Interesting.
And we always say, like, hate the behavior, but don't hate the part. And one of the C's is compassion. And we say, once you get to know your parts and you can have compassion for them, they'll generally calm down. Like, even if you think about if you're in an argument with someone or even yourself, if you don't feel seen and heard, you get louder and you're like, hey, I want to be seen and heard here. But if you could just, like, someone can make you feel seen and heard, or you can make someone feel seen and heard, then generally they'll calm down. And our parts are no different. Also with emotions, it's good to identify those as parts. So for example, say if I've got like an angry part or a sad part, rather than pushing it away, because often we go, oh, I can't deal with this, I'm busy, I'll deal with that later. Just stop for a moment and think, okay, I've got an angry part, and just imagine yourself. You can say in your head, I see you, I hear you. And what I find really helpful is I just imagine myself giving that part a hug, and it's so soothing for that part. Like, it just calms right down because it feels seen and heard and it got what it needed. It's like when we push our parts away, like they just get more intense or they just bubble underneath the surface. Like I always say to people, if they can't imagine that, imagine if that was your 6-year-old self and they're upset, you're not going to push them away. No. You're going to give them a hug. Like, you're going to give them that compassion. And that's why it's so powerful, because like they're just getting what they need. And we have all these parts within us. And like, our 6-year-old self or our 16-year-old self, like they all still very much exist within us. And like we should try and cultivate that compassion to, you know, treat those parts of us like they're still 6 or still 16, you know. It's very healing in itself. Like, you become your own healer when you do this work, because you're giving yourself what you need, or the parts of you what you need.
Instead of like looking for it on the external faces, like whether it be validation, love, empathy, anything like that, you're giving it to yourself. And I like that. So then with the internal family structures, would that also play into like the roles of self-sabotage and where our limiting beliefs and all the, let's call them not so fun parts, come into play?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Self-sabotage, definitely. And the limiting beliefs. So basically the structure in which you work with internal family systems, the parts of us, you've got the self energy. That's who you really are underneath all your conditioning, all your trauma, anything that's happened to you. Like, you know, that's your purest form. And everybody has self energy.
So I was going to say, would that be like the authentic self?
Yeah. Okay. Or you could refer to it, it's not really a new concept. Like you could refer to it as soul or love, but it's who you are really underneath everything. Then you've got your protector parts. So they're the parts of you that will act in ways to try and protect you, like your anxiety or your self-sabotage. But they have good intentions. But what they're actually protecting is a child self underneath, which is what we call your exiles, but, you know, your inner child. And the beliefs that are being carried underneath are generally like the wounds of your inner child. They tend to be things like, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not pretty enough, you know, those sorts of beliefs. Yeah. And they generally hold wounds of like shame, rejection, abandonment, things like that. Okay. Yeah.
So how would they hold me back? How could they show up in ways that hold me back or hold someone back from reaching their goals?
So you could have, say, a part of you that tells you like that, you know, you might have a part of you underneath that's like saying, oh, you can't go after that because you're not smart enough, or you need to do the next course. Oh, yeah. And then the next one, and then the next one.
I don't have all the information.
Yeah. Or like, I can't go after that, or there might be a part of you that's like, oh, if I go after that, or if I show up on social media, or if I go after my goals, like what will everyone think of me? And, you know, that can often stem from you grew up in an environment, or maybe you're even still in that environment. It might be well-intentioned family or friends, but they might have, say, for example, you want to go after something that's going to create success or wealth for you, but you grew up in a circle and might still be around them of people that are saying things like, I don't know, all rich people are assholes, or even like something like, oh, you've got to work hard to make money, which isn't necessarily true, because if it was, cleaners would probably be the best paid people in the world. Yeah, but like, you know, that you've got to work hard to make money. So someone might have a belief or a part that's like, well, I don't want to push further in my business because I'm going to get burnt out. And so they don't actually push forward, even though they know that they want to, and they know they want to, say, serve in a much bigger space, or they want to, you know, write the book, or, you know, just go after what they want and have more impact in their work, but they're so afraid that they'll get burnt out, so they'll stop themselves. Or they'll have a project and then they'll just like push pause at the very last minute or something like that. And it'll be because a part of them learnt somewhere along the way that like they're going to get really burnt out, or you have to work really hard to make money. It can sometimes be what we call a legacy burden. So it's not necessarily a belief of yours, but it's something you've adopted from like family or, even like generations back. Like it'll just be something that's been carried through.
Like the saying, we're talking about money doesn't grow on trees.
Yeah. Or like for me, I grew up with my parents saying children should be seen and not heard. So like that's a legacy burden, and they heard that from their parents and their parents, and it's those sorts of things that we get to release and then start to use our voice,
Interesting. So if I was wanting to start identifying at home to see how my self-sabotaging habits show up, how would I be able to pinpoint them if I've never been aware of them?
Generally, I think the first thing is to get curious on your patterning. Like, what have you noticed comes up as a pattern? Because generally that is a really good indicator. Like you might have had, the same pattern. Like you might have gotten to a certain point in your career and then something bad happens. Or some people have, like, they might have something big coming up and then they get sick. And that's genuinely a part of them. And I've worked on clients and done work around physical injuries as well. Like, for example, I had a client who had a foot injury for 6 months and it would not go away. She was going to physical therapy and nothing would help. And then we went and did the parts work on it, and she'd in the past had Crohn's disease and was really unwell and really exhausted at the time. But when we talked to the part, like her foot, and said, what's your role? And it was like to slow you down. And she'd been really busy at work. She'd been hitting the gym pretty hard. Like she was doing all the things. But this part was so afraid that she'd end up back there where she was so exhausted. She said she'd just sit on the sofa at night. She couldn't even speak to her partner because she just had nothing left. And this part was just like, I was so afraid of that happening again. And once we were able to like work with that part and like heal it, she could just like carry on as long as she checked in with that part every day. Then the part would like, the pain stopped.
Yeah.
And she could like go on with what she was doing. But listening to it as well, saying, she used to ask the part, what does rest look like today? And that part would say, okay, like, do this or don't do that. And she found that on the day she wasn't checking in with it, it would get sore again.
Interesting. So it's almost being like having a very clear, open relationship with yourself.
Totally.
To give it what it needs, or not necessarily what it wants, because we don't want to do that all the time.
Yeah.
But definitely what it needs.
Totally. And this is literally integrated self-love. Like I think people really struggle with the concept of self-love.
I can relate to that.
Yeah,
definitely.
I think a lot of people do. And, you just grow up and you're hearing like, just love yourself. And it's like, well, that's so much easier said than done. And until you heal your stuff, like that can be really challenging. But this allows you to stop suppressing the parts of yourself that you maybe were told weren't right, or that you shouldn't be that, or you were sent that message. And you can start to get to know them, develop a trusting relationship with them, have compassion for them, and also appreciation. Like even if they're doing something that might look like self-sabotage, once you realize why that part was doing its role, to keep you safe or to keep your younger self safe from, say, I'll use a public speaking example again, but say that self-sabotage shows up whenever you might have a big presentation at work, for example, and it was like it would have been a highlight of your career, but you came down with something and you lost your voice. That part's just trying to stop you from like feeling shame and ridicule that you felt in grade 1 when you read in front of your class and stumbled over your words. But once you know that and you can heal that part, like you can actually start to love it as well. And when we're not getting to know our parts, or we're rejecting them or pushing them away, it's literally like rejecting parts of yourself, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense, actually. Yeah. And you are right with the concept of self-love. I never had it. Couldn't have told you what it was, though. Mm-hmm. I thought self-love was just, facials and whatnot, right?
Totally. I put you to a face mask.
Yeah, it'd be good. I had zero idea that I didn't even have it, let alone what it was, until a therapist pointed it out to me. So I completely resonate. And I think a lot of women may not even realize they don't have it. So it's very interesting to hear that side of it too.
Yeah. Yeah, and just the tiny moments, like when I was talking about relational trauma before, we can have these tiny moments where, we were criticized, or something happened that was scary for us when we were little and we didn't have an adult there to comfort us. And I heard this saying on a podcast a few weeks ago. It's like when children have these moments of trauma, or their parents say something to them that makes them feel rejected. And I'm not saying it's necessarily the fault of the parents. Like they most of the time really well-meaning, but children don't stop loving their parents. They stop loving themselves. And it's true, because we rely on our parents for our survival. So we would never, that's a survival mechanism. We would never stop loving our parents because we need them. But we make it mean that it meant something about us.
And a lot of, I think, family guilt or shame may be delivered in that way. Like, especially if you're a child feeling like I'm not loved because of, maybe my parents separated and it was my fault.
Absolutely. And that's what happens. Children make something mean something about themselves.
Yeah.
100%.
So for you personally, did you ever experience any level of trauma, big or small, that kind of got you to the point where you're like, this line of work is for me because of this, and this is why I can now go and help others?
It wasn't really a specific moment. Like, I'd been in and out of therapy. I think I went to my first therapist when I was maybe 21. And it was just because I had debilitating anxiety, but I'd never looked at any of my childhood stuff. I hadn't acknowledged it. I had no self-compassion. I had very low self-esteem. And I just went to see a therapist for that. And then I was, because of my mental health struggles, in and out of therapy for like 10 years or something. And then, into my 30s as well. And I mean, I did find it helpful. I personally think talk therapy is great for if you're dealing with something really stressful in your life or a specific trauma or something. But like outside of that, I personally didn't find it that beneficial long term. And even now, like, I have a talk therapist, but I only see her once every 3 months, and it's just like a little maintenance thing. And I get something from her that I don't get anywhere else in my life. But I think it was more like, I guess, working with the coach who I became friends with, and then I started doing the IFS, and then I was just sitting on it for a while. I'd had a bit of experience with it, but I sat on it for a while, and then he just pulled me up one day and he said, stop fucking around, start your website, get 4 people, work with them for free for 4 weeks, get testimonials, and get out there. He's like, you are ready. He's like, you've had so much coaching, so much therapy. He's like, you're better than most coaches out there already. Like, just do it. And I was like, okay, that's a kick up the butt.
The conversation that we need sometimes.
Yeah. And that's kind of where I was like, okay, let's just do this. And ever since I started doing it, like, and working with clients, it's just been so fulfilling, and I just want more of it. And it's just one of those things that, like, it makes me an instant extrovert. Like, I could just talk about it all day, and I'm just so passionate about it.
I think that's when you found your thing, right? When you can just talk about it forever and it doesn't feel like time's passed.
Yeah.
And I think that's where true passion lies for people. And you can tell when you speak with someone whether they're truly passionate about something or whether it's just a conversation.
Yeah.
How much does self-compassion play in our role to healing or being able to get past those self-sabotaging moments?
I think it's absolutely essential. I also think, and I was having a conversation with a friend about this the other day, I think that in spiritual communities, there can be this mentality of, I don't want to play the victim. And I think that sometimes that's good and sometimes that's detrimental because they want to bypass the self-compassion piece.
Interesting. Okay.
Because they're like, I can't play victim. And yes, that's great that you don't want to play victim and you want to take self-responsibility. But I also think when we work with IFS, because you can separate and you can go, well, that was my 5-year-old self. I can have compassion for her, and that's exactly what she needs. That's so healing. And I heard a saying once that it's like, we experience trauma in moments where we feel very alone, but we experienced healing when we feel seen and heard and witnessed. And often that can be in storytelling. But with IFS, I'm guiding someone through, but I'm not the one. I am witnessing, but they are actually witnessing their 5-year-old self and saying, how do you feel? And finally, this 5-year-old self can say, well, I feel really scared, or I feel really upset. And, they get to finally express themselves and be met with attunement and compassion and empathy. And that's all they needed in that moment. But we, as ourselves today, get to go back into that moment and give that to our 5-year-old selves. And that's all they needed. And it's like you're rewriting that memory and then allowing them to release the burden that they're carrying, which might be, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, or what have you. That's why it's really powerful. And I think, like, we absolutely need the self-compassion to heal. And it's like being able to witness parts of you or yourself. And even when you do things today, a part of you does something and you're like, why did I do that? Or you feel shame or embarrassment, like, to know that that part of you that did that, they did it for a reason, and to just have compassion for that part. Like, we're human. We stuff up. We've all done things we're not proud of, like all of us. Nobody's exempt from that. And I think being a therapist now has been so beautiful in stopping me from comparing myself to others, because like people look at someone's highlight reel on Instagram and they're like, oh, their lives are perfect. And I'm just like, people say that to me. I'm like, everybody has got struggles.
Yeah.
Everyone, they all have struggles. And it doesn't matter if you might view their struggle as this big and yours is this big, that theirs feels this big to them. Yeah.
I agree with that. I think we get caught up, and I have in my life, of the comparison game, and it's like, oh, my problem's this big, they couldn't possibly understand. And it's like, well, their problem's probably this big to them as well, to their experience of their reality and what they're going through and everything that they've probably gone through until this point.
Yeah.
So the judgment game or the comparison game is one we don't want to get caught in.
Yeah. It's normal though. Like I remember watching, Brene Brown wrote Atlas of the Heart, but she did a little TV series on it where they sat around and talked about all the emotions that she'd written about. But she was saying about comparison and how it's normal because we've come from tribes, and it was like you had to constantly like make sure you were fitting in with the tribe because your survival depended on it.
Yeah.
She's like, you can't escape it. It's a normal thing. So also don't beat yourself up for it. But I guess perspective really helps when you can see that like everybody's struggling with something. For sure.
Definitely. If I struggle to turn that self-compassion on, what's some small little steps that I could take? Or if I had zero self-compassion like yourself?
It depends on the situation, I guess. Like it would depend on what someone would say they're struggling with like self-compassion. But maybe to flip that on its head, and I'll speak to a part that we all have, the inner critic.
My favourite part.
Yeah, like we all have one. But being able to speak to your inner critic and like imagine yourself giving your inner critic a hug. Like our inner critics can get so loud, like and so harsh. But it's like the more you try and push it away, because it feels awful to hear those things your inner critic says.
I relate to mine as an inner mean girl.
Yeah. Yeah. But like being able to like listen to your inner critic and then saying, oh yeah, I can see why you're concerned about that. And like they are just trying to keep you safe. Like they might say something really mean, but they're like, they're so afraid of you, like in their eyes, like that you're going to like say the wrong thing or like upset someone or whatever. But just being able to like imagine yourself giving that part a hug and just saying, I see you, I hear you. And then it's like you can recognize the part that's maybe like causing the lack of self-compassion, because naturally we do have compassion. Like that's who we are, the self-energy that I was talking about before. It's naturally compassionate, but being able to just separate yourself from the inner critic is often the one that's the culprit, but just, hey, I see you over there. Do you need a hug? And generally once they feel seen and heard, they'll calm down. And then that's like you're able to give yourself self-compassion, but for the part of you that needs it the most, or the anxious part, or like, you know, imagine like they're little children, you know, and like you would never say, you know, push them away or anything if they were feeling those ways. So
yeah. Like even if it wasn't you, the younger 5, if it was a different 5-year-old, you'd still not treat it in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. And often we can get confused or caught up in our inner critic's dialogue because we're just like, that's just so ridiculous. Like, just go away. But it's like, no, imagine that's a 5-year-old.
I have to catch myself doing that. I'm the person who suppresses. And then, as you were speaking earlier, the analogy that popped into my head is like when you have a ball and you're trying to push it underwater.
Yes.
You can only do it for so long before that either exhausts you or it's just going to pop back up. And when it pops back up, it's going to come up more than if you slowly brought it to the surface.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I always use that analogy in my work as well.
Yeah, I do that a lot with my anger. And then the inner critic, I'm just like, I don't have time. I don't have time for you person. Push it to the side, off we go, focus on something else, and just it'll erupt and we do it again.
Yes, and to speak to that, I think most women I work with have people pleaser parts, but they often have an angry part as well, and they're working polarization. Because with people pleasing, we suppress our anger, we suppress our voice, we don't speak up for our needs, we let people walk all over us, we say yes when we want to say no, and you might say yes to something and then you're driving home and you're like, why did I say yes? But it's like there's that angry part and they're in polarization with each other. But it's like the angry part is there for a reason. Like your anger is there to show you when your boundaries are being crossed. But if you have a people pleaser part, of course your boundaries are going to be crossed, because that part's like, I won't speak up. I won't say this, you know, I don't want to upset anybody. I want to keep everybody happy. But, you know, like being able to like know that the angry part is like equally as important. And it's generally just an indicator. Like you don't need to express it in a really aggressive way. Like I always say to people, like, I love pillow punching or screaming underwater. If you need to get it out, like that's always really good. But yeah, like when we've got that people pleaser and the angry part, like they'll tend to work. And generally the more the people pleaser, the more suppressed anger going on underneath. And a lot of women have suppressed it so much that they're walking around going, I just don't ever get angry. And I'm like, you're a human being. That is corrupt. Yeah. Eventually.
That was me speaking to myself. I was that I just don't get angry.
Yeah.
Like I'm not an angry person. I don't feel anger. I don't have anger. I'm just a bubble of sunshine.
Yeah.
24/7.
Yeah.
And it was the therapist was like, no, like it's there. You just haven't seen it yet.
Yes.
And I was like, okay.
And it's healthy and it's there to protect you. Like it's there to, advocate for you. And I think as we're brought up as girls as well to like, don't behave like that.
Yeah, the good girl.
Girls don't behave like that.
Yeah.
Girls don't yell. Girls don't scream. No, and we do that. And there's nothing wrong with that. But as little girls, like, we do. We rely on our parents for survival. And so whatever gets us approval, whatever gets us love, we do more of that. Mm-hmm. And, that children are seen and not heard, and like be a good girl, smile, like you even get it walking to the street, like some old man's like, oh, give us a smile, love, and you're just like, I'm not in the mood. Like, no. But it's like it still exists, yes. And so we keep getting these messages.
Well, obviously I can't speak for a man because I'm not one, but I feel like women do cop it a lot more. Or it's just how we're raised in that way.
It's so Richard Schwartz, who invented or discovered IFS, he has a book called You Are the One You've Been Waiting For. And he speaks in that about how women have these, what we call exiles, but being raised we need to be the caretakers. And that people pleaser part definitely taps into that, like keeping everybody happy and being pleasant and all those things. And, we can't possibly not be caretakers. And men have this like exile around like, I can't be perceived as weak.
Yeah.
And often, like I say to my clients, like women are generally sent the message that they're too much and they have to kind of contain their little behavior in a box, but men are sent the message that they are not enough.
Yep.
Yeah.
Actually, I could see that play out in society right now. Like you can pinpoint it as to when it happens. And you are right. Women are told constantly she's too much. And we even get that from each other.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't think that's a fault to either like of us. It's just the same conditioning that we all got.
Totally. And it's also, until we heal ourselves, like, you never show up in your full expression until you've done a lot of healing work on yourself. But until you allow yourself to heal and allow yourself to show up in your full expression, you will generally be triggered by other women that show up in theirs.
So if I'm like in a room and there's a female who's able to show up, let's say she likes to be really loud or be able to sing in front of people or be silly, that might trigger me to a way where I'm like, oh, that's not appropriate, or what is she doing, or judgmental if you will.
Totally. Yeah. And just like in all ways, like I've done so much work around this and I really do, I have intentions, like I would like to open up a space where I run retreats and things like that. But I've had experiences, I've done a lot of healing around the feminine and it's changed my life, and it's even changed my relationship to men by like healing a lot. I had a very strained relationship with my mother growing up, and I went into a plant medicine journey, and my intention was to forgive her. And I did, but it happened very quickly, like in the first probably half an hour of the journey. And then my journey went to me playing in my mind every single memory I have of any perceived negative experience I'd had with another female. And I said in this journey to each and every one of them, I forgive you, I forgive you, I forgive you. And then I went the other way and I could just see all these women, and I just said to all of them, like, I'm so sorry for every time I've ever judged you or compared myself to you or anything like that. And I just send you love and healing energy, and I want you to know that you don't have to carry your pain anymore. And then I went to myself and I said, I'm so sorry for every mean thing I've ever said about my own body, any self-destructive thing I've ever done. And it was so incredibly healing. And I used to get up in the mirror every morning and like say nasty things to myself about my body. And that weekend I went home and I stood up in front of the mirror on the Monday morning and I cried and I just said, I'm so sorry for all of the things I've said to you. Like that was just, you've done nothing but love me and keep me alive. And then I've gone on to have journeys where I've sat in circle with other women, and this is what I want to do in my work. I've sat in circle with other women with profound stories and such hardships and, you know, things that they've been through that I couldn't even begin to imagine. And I just had nothing but love and compassion for them. But even just sitting in circle and telling our stories, and my plant medicine training very much spoke to Western thought paired with like Indigenous knowing. And the Indigenous people knew to heal, they would sit in circle and tell stories.
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Yeah. And I want to create this for other women because we all have sister wounds.
Yes.
And like, I think if we all healed that, the world would be a better place, and it would change our relationship to men.
I agree, actually.
And, you know, like it would just heal so much. And like, that's the kind of like journeys I want to run. Like, and I do that in my work, like allow people to heal themselves, but then I want to run these journeys for like small groups of women where they can journey for a little, like this first half, and then they'll sit in circle and tell their stories at the end. And it's like, when you have the medicine, your ego is not there judging. It's a safe space. It's just pure self energy and love. And you just heal so much. And it was so interesting, the women I'd sat in circle with when I did those journeys, like they had very mirroring wounds to me. Like one of them said, you know, I felt really intimidated by you, and I was just like, oh my God, that's my biggest wound, to like make people feel uncomfortable. And like we talked about it, and it was so beautiful and healing. And it was just like, this stuff is so powerful. And I'm like, I want to bring that.
Which plant did you?
We used MD for that one.
Okay, nice.
And that's I work with MD and psilocybin.
Okay, nice, yeah.
Yeah, and just for very different reasons, obviously.
Yeah.
But like I feel like that was just, yeah, incredible. I feel like I always say to people, like in my work, even I'm like, don't rip the lid off, save it for the mushrooms, because like you're gonna rip the lid off. But like they're the two that I work with.
It's like Pandora's box. Once it's open, it's not closing
Yeah,
again.
you're not coming back. And IFS and plant medicine work really well together.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate enough to sit in the circles like you're discussing.
Oh yeah, beautiful.
Through, I really want to say it was like mushrooms one time,
Yeah.
and then ayahuasca another time.
Yeah, wow.
And you are right. Up until that point, I had never thought of my relationship with women was terrible. I just did not trust a female. So my female friend group was probably like 2. So the first time I went to a circle, I was like, this is either going to go really well or really bad.
Oh, good on you for going though. That's very brave.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And it was the single greatest thing I could have done.
Yeah.
For
Oh, I love that.
and I don't think us as women realize how important it is to have those relationships or even that type of space to go and sit in, because you realize that the female across from you may have been through exactly the same thing as you, or she probably had it 1,000 times worse. And how you start to look at each other is no longer a place of judgment or jealousy or criticism. It's a place of compassion and caring.
Yeah. And I think when I did that journey where I healed a lot of stuff around myself before that, like I had eating disorders and I was like obsessed with the way I looked, and like I was always so obsessed with my weight, and like I used to walk through life and every single woman I would look at and compare myself to. And once I'd done that healing, I just stopped doing it. So then it wasn't like I'm looking at you like competition. It was just like that was gone. And I could just see the human in front of me. And then I went on later on to do a lot of healing around men. And I noticed that that kind of shield dropped as well. It was like I used to speak to men and think every single time, no matter who they were, like, what do you want from me? And then that dropped. And it was like I could just take that person for who they were in front of me.
That's so interesting. There seems to be always this war between the genders. And it's like, does it really need to be there? Or if we just all separated and did our healing and came back together, we'd realize that we probably need each other more than we're giving each other credit for.
100%.
Instead, we have men are the problem, women are the problem. We're both the problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Like the healing has a lot to speak for. Like it could just change so much. But everyone, if they haven't healed that stuff, they're just looking at the world through that filter.
Yeah. That it's the filter of the trauma or the filter of whatever happened to them. So everything is blurred, or they're seeing it through that. So it could be like the 5-year-old showing up as, or the 16-year-old showing up in 32-year-old's body.
Yes.
Living life.
100%. Yeah. In that book that I mentioned before, that You Are the One You've Been Waiting For, I think that's what it's called. He's saying like we have all these exiles and, you know, if they're not healed, they'll run our life. But think about in relationship, when you're fighting with your partner, if they're getting all angry and upset and, you know, yelling at you or whatever, you're actually fighting with the 5-year-old version of them. And and they're fighting with the 5-year-old version of you too. Like you're getting nowhere because you're like five-year-olds
five-year-olds
just screaming at each other. But if you could look at them through that lens and they understood that concept as well and could look at you through that lens, imagine how much more compassion you would have, and imagine how much better your communication would be if you could look at it through that lens. 100%.
And jump so quickly.
Yeah.
Because there's the opportunity to work on whatever brought us together, or even in friendships, whatever brought us together, we could work through this as opposed to being like, oh, they're the problem. See you later.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's often from our wounds. It's like that person saying that to you and you go into story from a wound like, well, they don't care about me. That's not true. Like, that's not true at all. But like we have a story that runs on our, I guess, software system that we maybe haven't upgraded yet. And so we go through life looking at things through that lens. Like I have a wound of like, I don't want to be annoying. I'm afraid I'm going to be annoying. So like often that shows up for me. Like I'll kind of maybe get quieter or I'll do something because I think, oh, I don't want to be annoying or I don't want to bother them or I won't ask for what I need. I'll just be like, oh, I'll just take care of it myself. But it's like if I didn't have that wound, I'd probably just show up like way more in my full expression.
Can you ever heal the wound, or is it always still there?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think like any healing is like a spiral. It's like you never just like can fix it. I mean, maybe you can, but like, you know, I feel like I've healed stuff, and if you've done the work, you know, like you've done so much work, and then you're like, it comes back, and you're like, I've done all this work.
You're like, I thought I dealt with you already.
I'm done, but like it's still there, and it's like a spiral. It's like you just come back around to that point in the spiral, and there's just another layer, like it's an onion, and you know, like you just have to keep peeling back. The work never ends.
I know it doesn't. Like people are like, oh, I'm healed. I'm like, you're not.
Yeah.
Like healing's not linear. I don't think there's ever an end point. Like there's always just keep going.
Yeah, and it'll come up when it's ready and, you know, when you feel safe to do so. Teal Swan said something really cool about healing once, and she's like, last week I cut my toe open and it would not stop bleeding. It just kept bleeding and bleeding. And she said, I didn't then for the next week stare at it and go, heal. And she said, your healing's the same, like an onion. She said, the next layer will peel back when it's ready. You don't have to sit there and stare at the onion your whole life. Or, you know, some people can get obsessed with healing.
You're preaching to me right now. I'm that person. Yeah. I'm like you know, there's the journey or the destination. Yeah. I'm the destination person. Yeah. So I grew up as like a fixer. Yes. So I always wanted to fix something. And then I got to a point where there was nothing to fix in my life. And I was like, well, maybe I can find a problem. Yeah. Like maybe I can find a problem within me so that I'm like, okay, well, maybe if I can just fix me. Yeah. So it became like this little spiral of becoming so obsessed with the inner work and the therapy work and anything like that. That I was like, no, you're just trying to find things now that aren't ready to be found, basically.
They'll come when they're ready. Yeah. And it's like in parts, like when we deal with a part, we believe that like you deal with a part that is bothering you right now because it's ready. It's ready to be seen and heard. And that's why the anxiety is coming up, or that's why the anger is coming up, because it's ready. And it will get louder and louder until you address it. And we don't try and, go digging for whatever is underneath. But we just like, okay, this is ready to be dealt with. It wants to be seen and heard. It's showing up in your life in some way. So let's just work with that part.
Is that like if I was to constantly bring up a topic in conversation that might be like, oh, that part wants to talk about it?
Yeah. It can be like anything, like thoughts, feelings, or even physical sensations. Like it can be an injury.
Interesting.
Or it can be, you know, like you might just have a period of like high anxiety. That part of you wants to be seen and heard. It might be anger coming up, or it might be, you know, I've noticed, like you just noticed, like for example, you've just hit a new level because you've done a lot of healing, and then you're in a new relationship, and this relationship, you know, requires that you speak up and speak for your needs. And that might be really new to you. And you're like, this scares the absolute shit out of me. Like, I don't even know what my needs are. I've never asked for what I want. And it's like, you want to go there with your partner. Like you want to be vulnerable, but that might feel so scary to you. And so then say if I'm working with a client and they're like, I've noticed this coming up in my relationship. I'm like, cool, let's work with that part that's afraid of vulnerability, or that's afraid of uncertainty, or that's afraid of, you know, like I have people come to me and they've just got a lot of health anxiety. And if there's nothing wrong, they're just like, I'm so afraid I'm going to get sick. I'm so afraid that something bad's going to happen. That can happen too. And it can happen in health, but it can happen in all areas. Some people have very hypervigilant parts because something might have happened when they were a kid that almost felt like the rug was pulled out from underneath them, like quite a shocking experience. Again, doesn't have to appear big to anyone on the outside. It could just have been very scary and very big for your, say, 6-year-old self. So then that part of you developed, and they're just like constantly monitoring, trying to think 10 steps ahead, and, you know, like they're exhausted because that part's running their life. But, you know, just deal with that as it comes up.
So as each part presents itself, it's an opportunity for you to stop, get curious why it's showing up and how you can try and care for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And get to know it and develop a trusting relationship. It's called internal family systems because they believe that our parts are like a family and they all work together, or in polarization. And just like any family, sometimes they work together in a healthy way and sometimes a not so healthy way.
Sometimes it's dysfunctional.
But say you've got like 10 family members trying to have a fight and you can't hear a thing because they're all yelling. But it's like if you addressed each one of them and got them to, you know, let them be seen and heard, and everybody got their point across and everyone felt understood at the end, like very different experience. And our parts are kind of the same.
Yeah. That's interesting. So if I'm sitting at home trying to navigate my new world and I'm thinking about jumping into the internal family systems, what should be my first step?
You can just do, lots of research on the internet. You can try and find a practitioner if you would like to work with one. You can go on the IFS Institute website and look up a practitioner in your local area, or you can find one online. I purely work online. You can also dive into some of the books written on IFS. So Richard Schwartz has written a bunch. One's called No Bad Parts. You're the one you've been waiting for. There's an introduction to internal family systems. There's loads of podcasts out there now. Like a lot of people are talking about it. A lot of people have interviewed Richard Schwartz, or I'm just noticing it is becoming a bit more well known, and even some big podcast names are like, you know, speaking about it and have experienced it, and just its profound effects. Like it really is a different approach, and I think it's so powerful because it's so gentle, but also it actually hits on a bunch of different therapies. Like it's a little bit of talk therapy, but it's also a little bit of somatics because we're tapping into where's that part in your body. It's a bit of shadow work. It's a bit of inner child. It's a bit of visualization. Like it is so many different things it taps on. So like the main ones, IFS Institute website, the books, podcasts. There's lots of meditations on Insight Timer and even YouTube as well. And I think Richard Schwartz has done a lot of YouTube videos on sessions with people. Yeah.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Megan, where can everyone find you?
I hang out in Instagram mostly, and I'm at Mental Health Coach Megs, or my website is coachmegs.com.au. They're the main places.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for today's conversation. I absolutely enjoyed it, and hopefully our listeners did as well.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
No, thank you.